Let's talk politics. It's kind of a buzzword now, thanks to a certain number of more provocative individuals on the internet. But there's become a little bit of a following behind the idea. Is feminism cancer? So let's take a look. Now, my first exposure to this idea, feminism equals cancer, came from a guy whom I discovered via the internet named Milo Yiannopoulos. And the way I discovered it was a kind of a discussion panel featuring him and Christina Hoff Sommers and a guy named Steven Crowder, and they're supposed to do their opening remarks and whatever, and of course him being the provocateur that he is goes up there and says feminism is cancer, and then walks off because can't help but grandstand. And this is far from even the most provocative thing that he has said or possibly advocated for, depending on your opinion of what it means to advocate for something. I guess pedophilia thing that he was talking about. There's a lot of things about him as an individual and a lot of his political ideologies that I definitely disagree with. So I'm not advocating for that idea, but it is something that I would like to think of that was provoking to me to think about. Is feminism, as he would describe it, as cancer? So let's break that down. Now, what is feminism? If you Google the word feminism, as most of us do when we want to find out like the generally accepted definition of something, this is what comes up. And basically it comes out to advocacy for equalities between genders. Okay. Seems a lot of feminists will even appeal to that. That's what it means. It means advocating for equality. Now let's look at the word cancer. What does the word cancer mean? Well, medically you would describe it as uncontrolled division or the reproduction of cells that are either foreign to the body or that have been hijacked on a genetic level to be producing either more of their own copies or something else where it's damaging the host organism. There's an alternative version of the meaning of the word, which means something that is considered evil, destructive, or hard to control or contain. Just breaking down, feminism is cancer. If we use that secondary definition, of course, subjectively from the position of Milo Yiannopoulos or elsewhere on the internet, evil, destructive, hard to contain, you definitely can say hard to contain. Feminism is practically self-aware on the internet. The idea of uncontrolled division definitely feeds as well, and how it is one of the most divisive kind of political or ideological conversation points of the recent age, alongside maybe racism, which, if I can just put my opinion on there, I think the stage platform in NASCAR, I think, is a good thing. So that's my race position, but you can have your own. And I definitely prefer stock cars to open wheel racing. Anyways, now let's take a look at the word equality. What is equality? Well, according to that, it's like equal or basically even representation, having the same rights under the law. Well, okay. So I guess now I would ask you, if you're a feminist, what right does a man have that a woman does not? And I would ask you, what rights do women have that men do not? I don't think that's the equality that is going on in feminism. I think that it's a little bit more of the mathematical kind of equality. And you see this being asserted more and more as the transsexual, transgender agenda gains momentum, is that it's not simply the idea of equal rights and representation, but it's that men and women are equal in the same way that mathematically 1 is equal to 1. That it's the same value. And that, I'd say, defies logic, more or less, when you get down to it. Like, all you have to do is stand a male and a female besides one another, and then you can clearly see that they're not the same. They have different reproductive organs. I mean, even Bill Nye in his liberal progressive propaganda saves the world describe that there's a male brain and there's a female brain. So if that's the case, then clearly not the same. Does something have to be the same in order to be equal? I mean, if we're talking about mathematically, yes, it does. But if we're talking about rights and privileges, no, they don't. But, I mean, I think one of the things about feminism that exists, at least in this society, feminism exists primarily to either replace or to undermine the monogamous marriage as the primary protective institution for women, and that it's transferring that authority and that protective responsibility from the monogamous marriage to either government or other institutions that are similar to it. And why do I think that? Well, I come from a worldview that you'll figure out here pretty quickly. In Genesis 1:27, that God created man and woman in his image. Which, contrary to the World Mission Society, does not mean that there's a God the Mother. That's another video, I already covered it. What it does mean is that each men and women exist to fulfill what is called complementary roles for one another. Neither one is complete without the other, hence the existence of marriage, which is described in Genesis 2:18, saying that it's not good for a man to be alone, which nobody disagrees with. Everyone agrees with that statement. It's bad. And so he says that he's going to make for him a helper which is fit for him, basically his perfect match. The word there is actually the same term that is used to describe the Holy Spirit later in the New Testament. This helper, helpmate that God is going to give the man. And in case you didn't know, like, if I ask for help, it's because I am insufficient to accomplish a role, task, or responsibility that has been given to me. I need assistance. And so God doing this shows that man on his own is is unfit, maybe, in order to accomplish the goals which have been set out by his creator. He needs a helpmate. So what does God do? In Genesis 2:24, it's described that the perfect form of marriage. It says, this explains why a man will leave his father and mother, and he will take a wife, and together they will become one flesh. A maturity there, that it's a man, not a boy. He will pursue his wife, that it's his responsibility, that he will leave his father and mother, which means that he's becoming independent and no longer living in mom's basement, essentially, and that he will form a life unto himself, which he will then invite a woman to join him in, and that they will become one flesh, that they will be unified. Because in the creation of women, it says that it was a part of Adam taken out of him, and so that the process of marriage unifying that flesh back together. So Ephesians chapter 5 verse 22 through 33 expresses this even more. Most people will begin in verse 23, where it says, wives, submit, because it's kind of it's a controversial passage. Why would you make wives submit? It's something feminists have a lot of problem with, but it actually begins in verse 22. Submitting to one another. So it's not just wives have been fingered out that you need to submit, but it's that husbands and wives need to submit to each other, and that then there's additional special instructions beyond that given to women. And honestly, they're given the harder job. But if that structure is followed, that that women are to submit in the same way that the church submits to Christ, which honestly, with the growth of feminism over time, honestly, what I would say is that that's exactly what's happened. Because if you look at church history and Christian history, the church has not been very good at submitting to Christ as her metaphorical husband. She's not been good at it. She's been very rebellious, very selfish, and the way that wives submit to their husbands have reflected that in a local context. Because the responsibility is on men. It says that men are to love their wives in the same way that they love and care for their own flesh. Now, it's occasional that I'll skip a meal, but it's not. It's been a very long time since the last time I missed a whole day without eating something. In fact, this video is brought to you by my local caffeine. But what if I took that same amount of effort and translate it to the way that I took care of specifically one other person, being my wife? What if I did that? Would there be problems in marriage? Would women be in danger? Anyways, I think, is feminist cancer? I think that at the very least, it's unbiblical. If you claim to love God and love Christ, I don't know how you could justify being a feminist, given that it undermines the very key tenet of what Christ has established, being his church and the relationship he has with this church. Because feminism is about independence from men, whereas Christ is about becoming interwoven with men. It's about men caring for and loving their wives specifically, and women caring for and loving and submitting to their husbands. And if you have a worldview like feminism, which is constantly combating against those two ideas, you are both undermining and rebelling against one of the most important physical representations of and wonderful gifts of the gospel. So, is feminist cancer? It's definitely a cancer in the church. In society, another argument can be made, but I think if Christians would get their acts together and watch over their own marriages and watch over their own households, and ascribing their own responsibility to fulfilling the implications of Ephesians chapter 5, feminism wouldn't be necessary in society. So, agree or disagree? I guess like and subscribe if you like that, and if you don't, then leave me a hate comment. I love it. I'd love to read it.